I'm kind of like I think people like my because I'm kind of a unique kind of character.
And I have
You just see how games and possessions are more intense, how they mean more.
I'm not putting him on.
I think the U.S. is going to obviously win.
Hello and welcome to another very special episode of Nothing But Respect. My name is Harry Krinsky. I am joined, as always, by Patrick Redford. And today, our single lady of the evening, her love language is women's basketball.
I don't identify as a lady.
She doesn't identify as a lady. Their love language is women's basketball.
I use she pronouns. I'm not a lady.
Right. Oh, you don't identify as a lady specific. Okay, yeah, totally. They know what she wants out of a partner. They're looking to make lustful eye contact across the bar as the Portland Timbers or the Valkyries or some women's sports. Oh wait, the Portland Timbers are
Thorns is what you're going for. I believe.
Yes, I'm sorry. Is playing at a lovely bar near you.
Harry
we
loves
have
WNBA and queers.
Yes, we have Maya Goldberg-Safir. How are you?
I'm good. Hi.
Thank you so much for coming back on. It's good to see you again.
Of course, great to be with the boys.
Great to be here with everyone. You came on like a year ago. Is a classic ep. It was a good ep, and we had you back on to sort of do like a sort of W summer catch up, the Valks vibe report. A lot's been happening, but I feel like we got to start with WNBA All-Star Weekend, which was in Chicago, where you famously used to live, and you were there checking out the vibes, trying to find love, writing about it all. Just so like top line report, like what was it like in Chicago?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, okay, major life news, which I've never shared such a thing on social media, but I'll do it here on the pod. I moved from Chicago, where I lived for 13 years. I mean, this already happened. You guys already know it. But
okay. I'm like, you moved back to Chicago?
Yeah.
The sky
no, in the last year, since I was on the pod. Since I was on the pod, I moved from Chicago back to where I grew up, Oakland, California, because Harry and I are Bay kids. And that's the change. But so this was my first trip going back to Chicago since I moved out of it. And it was kind of amazing overall to be in Chicago. I think that All-Star Weekend, I made this like fat itinerary for what I was going to do. And there was like so much stuff on the internet that was using like weird AI imagery, like the number of events that were apparently going on, like it was so overwhelming. And I say this also after going to the WNBA All-Star Weekend the last time it was in Chicago in 2022, when Kathy Engelbert actually made this comment about how the activations were so small. There was like this tiny area outside of Wintrust Arena where the Sky play that had like All-Star Weekend activations. And Kathy made this bullshit comment being like, the gun violence here in Chicago, like we have to be careful type shit. God. I'm not quoting her exactly, but it was like a nod to fucking gun violence. And as a justification for why the activations were so shitty in 2022. And this was like obviously so different. And there was like just like a torrential thunderstorm of shit going on across the city. And so I think like I'm would love to talk to even more people about All-Star Weekend. I was thinking about how the vibe of All-Star Weekend in some ways has fundamentally changed, because I think back in the day, going to WNBA All-Star Weekend was like in some ways analogous to traveling to a remote part of the world.
Wait, how so?
Yeah.
Well, I think women's basketball has often felt like that to me, sort of in the before times, right? It's like, I know that I want to go to, this, I don't know where, forest in Bolivia. And I know that I'm only going to find other people there that also really want to be there. And there's not going to be that many of them. And the like institutional setup isn't going to be fancy necessarily, or like it's no Cabo, right? Like
You're gonna have to take a few trains, maybe a
Yeah.
gondola.
yes, exactly. But every person that I meet that's there for the same reason, I'm going to have something to talk to them about. And I'm going to have, like, it's going to be friendly and we're just going to sort of connect. And the possibility for finding, like, side quest adventures together, sort of making new friends, all those kinds of things, very high. And now it's like, right, it's like going to this thing that everyone's paying attention to that has a kind of downtown quality to it, under the bright lights. And I think that that's a big shift. And I'd love to talk to more folks who have been going for a long time, who are still going, or also maybe people who are like, think that they're going to All-Star Weekend for one reason. For example, like to be in the mix with players, to see them up close, to really get that like intimate sense of like hanging out with players, and then potentially discover that the weekend is full of like long lines and overhyped like branded
DoorDash activations.
exactly, and like you get some like a vino face mist after standing in line at the Together House for an hour and a half. And I don't know, maybe that's satisfying for people. A WNBA player pops in and you take a quick selfie and you have like one moment of interaction, and maybe that's where we're at this point. Maybe that's sort of like gratifying and enough for people. I didn't make it into there was an Unrivaled activation at a coffee place in Chicago where players were the baristas taking your orders for coffee and serving you. The line for that was also insane. And it required you to show up at like a very particular time. And then when it was late, then you missed your time, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that's not my jam personally. I would rather go to a forest in Bolivia and meet the 3 other people that happen to be there. So I created this itinerary that I think, looking back, I feel pretty good about my choices. I wasn't trying to be like front and center at all the most like sort of hype stuff. In fact, I didn't even go to the game or the skills challenge.
Well, as everyone says, for any All-Star game, the worst part of the weekend is the game. You know, it's like a networking event. It's a partying thing. And I do want to get into this story you wrote for Bustle about your itinerary. Like, I had such a fun time reading it, and like knowing you and how you're sort of capable of having 7 conversations at once. Like, I've seen you at parties at my house. It's like the energy you have is just amazing. But I want to sort of posit a theory. I mean, we see in this like forest in Bolivia versus like, you know, Deloitte, Nike, Google, DoorDash activation machine, it kind of like it is sort of an analog of how the feel around the league and like the fandom around the league and the attention around the league has changed. Like, do you buy this theory? Does that sort of make sense?
Wait, say it again. Sorry.
Well, do you see in sort of the differing attention levels of the All-Star game from 4 years ago to now, like that sort of mirroring like the broad tensions of the league as it's like kind of trying to get this more mainstream thing? Like, that's a leading question, but you see where I'm going.
Yeah. Yes, I do. I think that's, I think that the WNBA is sort of turning into an amusement park version of itself. And I think that sometimes making the league sort of more of a main stage spectacular can work. I wonder if it works in particular, like through your phone screen. And then in other ways, I think it can feel inflated at times. For example, like, I mean, ticket prices. And let's say in Chicago, where I used to live, and the franchise that, you know, did not or like totally sort of fucked over the star that was meant to be the future of their franchise in Angel Reese, and sold like such inflated ticket prices off of, you know, Angel and Camilla as the sort of future of the franchise in an arena, Wintrust Arena, that is still a college arena and feels like, I always say, being at a Chuck E. Cheese. Like, a rundown Chuck E. Cheese, perhaps, that hasn't been renovated in a long time. Like, there's all you can buy is like
a bad
a
Chuck
hot
E.
dog.
Cheese.
Yeah.
One of the
battery-
rats needs WD-40.
Yeah. You're like, oh, you want to eat a hot dog and fries, or like a frozen hot dog, or a frozen burger with fries. Like, that's all you're getting. You know, it's light years away from something like Chase Center or Barclays.
Right.
And so I think that can be frustrating to fans for sure, who are sort of like, wait a second, like, what am I paying for here? And I, am all about disrupting capitalism. I think there's a benefit in some ways, potentially, to fans that are looking for experiences and opportunities and community, now not necessarily being totally satisfied with the offerings of the WNBA and the branded partnerships, and wanting to like find those elsewhere. Like, hell yeah, let's get out of just Wintrust Arena and find our way into these communities. And at the same time that the WNBA is taking on all these new sponsors and brand deals, like, there's also such a sort of growing diversity of the fan base too, right? Like, you have people that are getting interested in it through queer politics, or like through more sort of like creative and artsy like vantage points, the fashion, let's say, or, through like grassroots political organizing, like working family parties, like supporting, watch parties and stuff. Like, what are all those people trying to put together? And how do we make those events more visible? So my itinerary was really meant to be like a mix of sort of more grassroots events from the community, and some of the things that I thought seemed potentially interesting about taking advantage of, All-Star Weekend and sort of the hype. I think the decision I'm most proud of is that, I commented on an account that was advertising for this stand-up comedy show in Chicago that Sydney Colson and Teresa Plaisance were part of. And I said, are you guys giving away tickets? And I don't usually do that, but they were $70. And so they were like, yeah, if you post about it, like, we'll give you tickets. I said, sure thing. I do believe in this product.
You're an influencer.
That was my first influencing moment. I put it on my itinerary, and I did get to go for free. And I left right after Sydney Colson and Teresa Plaisance did perform, although I think the rest of the show was legit. But seeing those two perform stand-up was probably the highlight. It was Sid's third time ever performing stand-up and TP's first time ever performing in like a legit stand-up show in Chicago, in Talia Hall, full house. Like, and that was really fucking cool. Like, I love All-Stars potentially as sort of jumping off point for them to like do other cool shit that's not necessarily just like be in the Aveeno commercial.
And they were funny, right? Like, I saw some clips of Sid's things. Sid is so funny.
She's so funny. Like, she was coming out of her mother's birth canal in her fucking stand-up set, like shouting things about lesbians. I don't know. She's so into it and really.
This
really
has
fun.
been the sorry to cut you off, by the Sid Colson is hilarious. Since I entered WNBA media at all, it's like I have been hearing about how funny Sid Colson is. Like, when it must have been when she was like, people have been like, who's really funny? Let's say Sid Colson. And so it's cool that she's kind of getting moving from just sort of like, oh, who's a good hang, to like actually doing stand up is exciting. I did have one. You're giving us some very useful context, Maya, but there's one piece of context that you have left out that is evident in your puzzle piece, which is that you were also looking for love.
Yeah.
This was you the structure of the piece, which I agree I loved, was also centered around kind of looking for some queer connection. And I have two questions. One, I want to know about the specifics. What, did anything happen that didn't make the piece? But maybe more importantly, when did you know that love was going to be central to this piece?
Okay. So what happened was that Bustle was actually looking for somebody to attend a sapphic speed dating event for WNBA fans at a women's sports bar that somebody sent me this request specifically, and I was like, I wish I was less qualified for this, but unfortunately, in my experience of being queer, which I wasn't always sort of embodying as fully as I, am now, I am drawn to people from within sort of the world of the WNBA. And, it truly, women's basketball, I worked at an arts nonprofit for a long time and sort of came back around to women's basketball, the sport I played growing up, and, didn't sort of articulate I was a young queer person at the time, but it's my love language in so many ways. And it's something that I love connecting with other people through. The question of do I like it in the context of a sapphic speed dating event for at a women's sports bar? Unclear.
Can there be too much of a good thing?
Exactly. And right. And the thing was that event was actually happening in New York. We thought that maybe it was happening in Chicago for a second. It was a little miscommunication. But it was actually in New York. It wasn't in Chicago. But after that, the editor was like, I'd still love to work with you. What if you wrote something about All-Star Weekend? So I challenged
so love was
myself.
On the brain.
Love was then on the brain because I did in fact want to write a piece about, my experience. I love writing. I'm a full-time freelance women's basketball writer right now. So I'm trying to make a living writing about women's basketball. And I write about it in a lot of ways, especially sort of the culture and politics and history of the sport. But it is true that it's very personal to me too. So I thought, okay, I'll be brave. I'll go looking for love. The truth is that I really do lead through looking for community, and like Patrick said, apparently having 20 conversations at once. It is not top of mind for me that those conversations need to be about flirting or being flirted with. I really love connecting with other people. I'm an extrovert. And I think that community is, it's all kinds of things. I'm obsessed with the sort of intergenerational and queer and diverse fandom of the WNBA. And so I did flirt with Teresa Plaisance, maybe.
That was my favorite anecdote of the story. Pulling up JPEGs on your phone. Can you tell that story?
Yes. No, literally. I know. I found my way into this invite only after party with Sid and TP, and then was I don't need to talk to them. Don't bother them. You don't need to talk to them. And then was standing next to Teresa Plaisance and was immediately hey, can I show you the dorky women's basketball thing I'm obsessed with? And he was truly so kind. And I haven't had that many experiences where press conferences are sort of weird, right? You have this almost adversarial thing going with the media and the players. So to have someone who TP was just happy to chat with me and was what's your name? Had a curiosity about me. And I was just I'm melting. I guess I'm melting. And I pulled up this really deranged 1970s women's basketball logo for one of the first pro women's basketball teams in the US, the Milwaukee Does, that I am obsessed with and have been doing a bunch of reporting on, and I'm trying to pitch a podcast about, actually. And the logo is literally a deer, the Milwaukee Does, DOES, that is busty, huge tits, huge ass, a sexy deer.
Yeah, it is kind of Lola Bunny vibes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That that a man who I'm also trying to report a bunch about, I'm very fixated on this one man, thought would be a great logo for a women's basketball team.
You've identified the particular man.
Yes, the general manager of the team at the time is my new obsession.
Wait, so he was putting together the team, but also being what's the sexiest deer that I can draw with 1970s technology?
This is correct. Yeah, because that's what's going to sell women's basketball.
I mean, this is not really something that we had too much on the agenda, but something I like about your work generally is I feel like you you are such a good, like, so interested in the history of the sport, and like, particularly now at this big moment where like everything seems to be sort of changing and exploding, and like the league's conception of itself is increasingly at odds with like its fan base. Like, what about like the sort of early history of women's basketball feels so important and like relevant to the like very current day right now?
Yeah, totally. I think that like the very reason why women's basketball, I think, is like so exciting and sort of like juicy right now is this feeling of like, wait, why did it take so long for this thing to be cool? Or like, how did we miss this, kind of? Or like, there's already such a sort of developed world with such depth. Like, how did this come to be? And that happens through these generations of women's basketball players, like passing the game down. And again, the people who, you know, wanted to be there before the thing was recognized as cool, like cherishing it and celebrating it, and finding ways to continue like translating that over the decades. And I think that still so many of these stories are getting lost of like what really made women's basketball cool to begin with, because the narration has oftentimes, like the sort of top line narration has been by a kind of like mainstream, often white, often male, sports writers or marketers or general managers that really have no idea what they're talking about. So like you had in 1978, right? Like secret couples of like two women dating each other while playing on the same team. Like no one knows of those stories. And that you also had these experiences of women that, had experiences of like triumph and greatness and, overcoming the odds, and also experiences of trauma and like being screwed over and not getting their paychecks, that are magnified or reflected today, I think. Or there are these like parallels, right? There are these through lines, but the women from who played pro basketball, especially before the WNBA, also early WNBA, they're oftentimes willing to be like way more honest, candid, real, direct about what they experienced, because the stakes are different, right? And they didn't make a ton of monies off of their careers, and we can talk to you about like what they deserve. And this CBA contract has included a one-time payment to retired WNBA players who played for 5 years or more in the league, starting at $30K, one-time payment. I definitely think it should be a recurring payment, and it certainly doesn't sort of reflect the women that made this WNBA possible, who oftentimes were really like pushing for pro women's basketball in ways that didn't end up turning into 5 years in the WNBA, because there was also an ABL, another league, there was, international play. And now I'm sort of rambling on. But anyway, I think there's just so much there, basically, that's just like the same kind of juicy stories we're looking for now are like existed in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and people will talk about them more directly and fully.
No, I think that's a really, really good, important answer. And like, I think especially now, like this actually does, I think, transition us into this Sophie Fever stuff in this like interesting way, because I don't know how often they'll explicitly say it, but the sort of like premise of when like the Riley Gaines, Clay Travis, like bigot type people talk about the Fever specifically is basically that like women's basketball did not exist until Caitlin Clark invented shooting the 3-pointer and like invented women's basketball along with it. And like so much of the way that they talk about the league and everyone's place in it is like rests on that premise. And like that to me is sort of why so much of your work, like why I really feel drawn to it, is that it establishes like what really happened and like just exactly how ahistorical and wrong that is.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that is a good segue. And I guess it's important, I think, to remind ourselves that like, yes, there is this influx of attention from like the MAGA right and sort of Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham much more self-righteously and grifterly now, like wanting to be the center of attention by the sort of MAGA right. But at the same time, like the league itself, the WNBA, right, like really did embrace Caitlin Clark as the face of the league. And I think in a lot of ways, because of her sort of lack of personal politics or like, and the ability of audiences, including this sort of more right-wing, more white, like, quote unquote mainstream, to like map themselves onto her. So which is to say, it's not just this sort of outsider force coming in. Like, I think we still have these issues and questions of like, what is the WNBA as an institution standing up for, right? Who are they taking the most money from, or, you know, providing money for, right? Like Google and these NBA owners that control still 60% or more of the league. And so, yeah, that is also something that I think is like worth pushing at from the inside too. And yeah.
One thing as okay, and it kind of ties into this ridiculous Milwaukee Doe thing, is like the Overton window of like what people thought, like why people thought the women's basketball was successful, was so skewed into like La La Land in the 70s and 80s. Like it's kind of ridiculous conversations that even the experience of like moving it more towards something normal that's not sort of like outright sexist or outright like people want to see women in like athleisure or whatever. Yeah, is like there's actually still such a way on the other end of the window, like still so much to go. And I think it creates this interesting thing where like you get this experience, you get the sort of feeling of a tremendous amount of progress, this like leap forward. And yes, there have been leaps forward, but that doesn't mean that they like work of understanding the actual kind of real naughtiness of why the WNBA is successful is still like clearly the quote unquote mainstream or like oversimplified media apparatus is still so unequipped to handle that. Yeah. But there's this idea that they are equipped because they've come so far. I think that's part of it. I mean, you wrote this, and I was listening to in the Ringer WNBA show, Sarah had ER Fightmaster on, and they said something that I thought was interesting, which was like, and we were kind of getting at this before, which was like the W has always been kind of this queer league and had this sort of like definitionally outsider thing in the way that queerness is, and then you're getting this like magma beam of the mainstream media pointed at a very kind of idiosyncratic space and like simplifying it and dumbing it down and trying to kind of portion it out in these ways. And I think that's one of the places like I see this kind of like willful oversimplification of what is like clearly these naughty sets of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. It makes me think about how like one of the ways that I find myself wanting to sort of like challenge these narratives or media narratives, maybe including from people who are, you know, members of the WNBA media or are fans of the WNBA, talking about like, you know, now we can have more complicated conversations about women's basketball rather than just the conversation that is like women's basketball exists and so we have to be defensive of it and we have to support it. There's this idea that was like the long time sort of narrative, and that now it's big enough that narratives can be more complicated and complex, and people can be sort of more three-dimensional characters, which I think can be true to some extent. I guess my big reaction is being like, okay, then let's use that perspective to look at the history of the sport that's still very real and like present right now, and be more critical about what has happened. Because if we're not doing that, then like, yeah, do we have the tools to address what's going on right now? If we're not really unpacking like where we've been, and like how also some of these like institutional pressures and politics are already embedded into the sport itself. The fact that the answer to pro women's basketball in the US sort of had to come from the NBA, right? The men's league, because of, you know, the rules of capitalism and their sort of ability to dominate this space and to, you know, be in with all the broadcasters. And like, is that the only way that women's basketball could have gone, or the only way that we can think about it is as being a creation of this men's league? Like, I think that unsettling some of these things that we just take for face value as being true about the WNBA, and looking into the roots of them can really help us also to like unsettle the discourse now. And I think as you're talking, I was totally thinking about the way that, you know, like women's basketball has been sort of like such a popular sort of punching bag point has been like, well, these women are ugly. These women aren't, you know, hot enough to be marketed. These women aren't talented enough. And, or that their value is so intrinsically linked to their appeal to men. And we know that that is like deeply sexist, homophobic, transphobic, racist. And I think that we're kind of hearing some of the echoes of that too, when people are getting behind sort of Sophie Cunningham as this like representation, supposedly, of the like feminine, straight, white, acceptable like women's basketball player. It's like the people that are the people that she's attracting. I mean, the like anti-trans activists, the MAGA right, the sort of racist, those aren't women's basketball fans, right? Those are people who in some way are imagining destroying the WNBA completely as it is and recreating it in their own image. Like, and I think that those, like, somehow the WNBA has been able to, I think through its fandom, through its players, break through the kind of like mold, the sort of like systems of oppression that created this like Milwaukee Does, you know, wanted like blonde straight players from the beginning to be the face of the thing. Like, we've managed to sort of, I think, prove and demonstrate that that is not where the success of women's basketball lies, and that there is such a strong community of people and players that want Black women and Black queer women and queer women, queer folks, like, to sort of lead this as a movement, and that there's like great value in that. At the same time, we're still sort of like experiencing people trying to like put the reins back on it and be like, wait, this is not what it was supposed to be, right? Like, we are you know, the basic shit that we know in this country of like white male supremacy, like, they're still around. And I think that, again, because the WNBA in a lot of ways was sort of born of that. I mean, if you look back to the beginning of pro women's basketball in the US, every single owner basically was a man, and nearly universally white men too, who had access to money and resources, right? Who did these players and fans have to sort of rely on in order to make this thing possible? And then who was able to pull the rug out really quickly and screw it over and say, actually, this isn't working for us. I'm not making enough money. Or like, you guys aren't good enough at basketball. You're not pretty enough. Like, this is a bad product. Men. And I think those people have never been held accountable. And there are like real people in history that have done some really shady, if not criminal stuff. Teaser. That whose stories we haven't told. And like, all too often it just comes back on, the women being not enough. So yeah. That's what
I think that is a very good, long, thorough answer that I totally agree with. And like, of the many sort of fractures that like this extended. So did you see she's trying to sell an autobiography now?
No.
Which is just, it's so insane to do after 2 days after being like, we should just talk about basketball. Why are so many people asking me about, you know, the own things I've said?
She's such a fucking con man. She's so crazy. Like, being like, oh, some people when they play the Fever try to take advantage of blah, blah, blah. Bitch, you created this fucking MAGA ass platform for yourself.
Wait,
you're
but before,
the one.
I want to get to all this, but let's set the scene. For the uninitiated. Yes.
3 weeks ago.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago.
Somehow it feels like months ago.
Yeah.
ESPN does this whole profile of Sophie Cunningham where they're like, get this. There's the blonde straight lady who plays in the WNBA, and she's low-key swaggy with it. And it's this like weirdly soft focus profile of her that like accepts all of her stupid premises. And the controversial moment comes when I forget exactly what she says, but she's basically like, she does that. We have to protect women's sports from these like the specter of trans athletes.
She's like, I don't want to play with biological men.
Yeah, the classic thing that they all say. And then this like, I feel like this starts the firestorm, but it really blows up when she's asked about it and like really doubles down a few days later, right? Where she basically just says like, we got to not have trans people in the league. I'm maybe I'm just
I stand behind what I said. It's common sense. I don't think she ever says, no, I want to.
Well, I guess, yeah, but she makes her point and doubles down on it. And like,
For sure.
Lauren Tyson wrote something about this for us last week, which I thought was so important, which is that like, there are no trans women in the league. Like the right has now sort of found through this controversy their ideal trans athlete, and they get to have this like sort of panicked conversation about the specter of trans women taking over the WNBA, which like has nothing to do with the game as it's played or like the state of anti-trans politics in the country or anything. Like it's this total boogeyman. And so that escalates it. Everyone starts getting involved. All these famous right-wing people start talking about it.
By everyone, we mean people that typically have nothing to do with the WNBA.
Well, that was the point I was going to make earlier is like through this controversy, we see that the biggest lie, or like the fundamental lie of the last 3 or 4 years of like, oh, look at all these people getting into women's basketball. You have to cater to them is like, they don't fucking care about this shit at all. They just want to win. Like this is politics to them. And so everyone's asked about it.
There's a protest. There's at the Seattle Storm versus Fever. There's like a pro Sophie Cunningham protest, which has I should pull up while we're looking. I'll pull up the name because another one of the kind of hallmark of this sort of I think bad faith grifter stuff is like you can't have your name be the like we don't want trans women in sports committee. So they are like, they come up, which is like a great sign that you're on some bullshit, that you're like, their thing is something, it's like literally something like the Together Butterfly movement. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, and so they have this protest that there's like a kind of counter protest. That, grounds it to some degree, moves it from the URL space to the IRL space where like this is actually being I think the size of this protest is worth probably interrogating. It does not sound like there was a tremendous amount of people protesting. But anyway, so that's another node in all of this. And then the kind of most recent, blow here is Royce White and his Freedom kind of fake declaring for the WNBA in these like really stupid, kind of pathetic short form videos. And being referred to as NBA stars in like foxnews.com blog posts, which again, another massive lie. Also
to say that they are identifying as transgender when they have spewed anti-trans hate for years.
Right. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, it's
so clearly cynical. It's such a lie. Yeah.
And I want to get into like, there's this urge. I'm going to put a pin in this for a sec. Cause there's this urge of all of us to just sort of like outright dismiss these people. Like they're bozos and they are, but I'm going to return to that later. But you were going off before, Maya, I cut you off just on the sort of cynicism beyond this.
I mean, well, one of the things that it makes me most fired up about is not focusing and not to sort of like ignore or not talk about the weight of the transphobia and the grifters who are sort of coming on and what that means. But I think what we also end up talking about is like these sort of practical jokes of, or not practical jokes, that's not exactly what it is, right? But these, cynical, this
Stunts,
like cynical
kind of, yeah.
Stunts, fucking made up behavior by people that want us to talk about them. And what we're not talking about are the very real and present trans fans of the WNBA and what queer community in the WNBA really means, which I think is not categorical, right? We can't separate queer people into nice little categories of, sure, there's lesbians, but not trans people. No, like queer community is of course expansive, and the WNBA is banking on queer folks, including trans folks, gender nonconforming folks, non-binary folks who are actually part of this world to continue spending their money. That is in part why they are so successful in markets like the Bay Area or Portland or Philadelphia, where they are expanding, right? Like, to not acknowledge those people as already being very real and like strong members of this community that help drive the success of the WNBA, for me also reminds me again of this thing that they called the glass closet era of the WNBA, which was this notion that in the 90s, when the league did not acknowledge lesbian fans, nor were there any players that were out as queer in the league, right? There weren't any players that were out until 2002. And while individual franchises in the WNBA did have in the early 2000s, or like starting in 2000, host gay pride nights, the league itself did not have a league-wide pride until 2014, right?
Wow. Damn.
And so that time was referred to as the glass closet era, this idea that there were many lesbians. In fact, the core of the fan base, the reason that it was, able to exist in the first place relied on the presence of lesbians. And yet people, they were not recognized. They were not articulated. They couldn't articulate themselves. They weren't seen. And I think that a similar thing is happening right now with trans and non-binary people being part of the WNBA community.
I think that is a really important point. And like one of the underlying, I think, like assumptions that a lot of people just kind of take at face value when they're talking about like the business proposition of the league vis-a-vis like its queerness is they sort of uncritically accept that like if the league wants to make money, it has to get straighter right now.
Right.
Which like we've all been to Golden State Valkyries games. We know that that's not true. You know what I mean? That like positing those two things as mutually opposed is essentially buying into like the bigoted logic of all these guys.
Yes, and it's buying into the longtime logic, I think, of mainstream sports media like ESPN. I think maybe I don't even consume a ton of the most mainstream sports media, but like I did hear.
You're not a big Pat McAfee fan, Maya?
Right. Like I literally cannot picture that person's face. But I think he does the thing where there's multiple topics to talk about.
Yeah, he's like a sunburnt guy who like looms in a tank top, and there's it's like he has the topics on his.
The storytelling format is familiar to me, but the man is lost.
Okay, I understand. Yeah.
But no, I mean, and I overheard, or I think there was someone at WNBA All-Star Weekend, a prominent WNBA broadcaster on ESPN, talking about how the way that they create their shows is that they get this like survey with like recent topics of the WNBA that the different broadcasters have to respond to and write their opinions about, and then they find the points where there is the most dissent or disagreement to focus on, right? And to trump up where there is a disagreement. And then this person was also talking about how frustrating it is to have to work with people who insist on like defending their point with this kind of like self-righteousness of like, I'm right and this is my point. I'm not even listening to other people, right? I'm just coming here to double down, that it's not actually a conversation, an exchange of ideas. Like that's the legacy of sports media. It seems like to me that we're coming from, and does that really benefit this league and what is so captivating for so much of the audience right now, which is actually having nothing to do with that sort of history of sports culture that queer folks especially have been excluded from for so long. You know what I mean? Like, So I think the WNBA, like, you know, even before Sophie Cunningham a couple of weeks ago, like, has had one foot in that for a long time and has these like institutional and sort of commercial ties to that kind of vantage point, which, as I think you guys have sort of said from the beginning and other folks have said, is sort of losing the plot of how the league is really being successful right now based on its fans and its players.
Yeah, I think that is all very true, and something I've been thinking about a lot at a sort of more meta discursive level is like when these huge controversies are happening, they take up so much attention, and it is like the thing everyone talks about, and it feels so important because it's like, you know, Donald Trump is not out here tweeting about how like, oh, the Toronto Tempo are like sort of surprisingly good, which is like the interesting on-court story that I think like, you know, more hardcore fans are into stuff like that. How like this really kind of blots out the sun of like the actual like basketball stuff of it, such that like if you are someone who, you know, has your foot in both worlds, I think it can probably feel kind of paralyzing of like, what I really want to do is just talk about like, is Gabby Williams the DPOY? But instead, like the sort of the gravitational death ray of all this attention is like on the Sophie stuff. And so like, does that make sense? Like, it feels like there's just such a weird imbalance.
Death ray. That's like such a Patrickicism. I admire you so much for just pulling that out. I think, I mean, for me too, it's like, yeah, I want to talk about the basketball. I also do want to talk about how women's basketball players and queer folks are oftentimes much more interesting to me personally than men and to many other people. And I want to talk about Gabby's, you know, evolution as sort of a political leader in the WNBA, someone that said, I'm not going to like play in this league that doesn't pay me, you know, a couple of years ago. I'm going to stay in France and make more money. Like, I want to talk about these players as the sort of like complex political, you know, thinkers, people in the world like that they are. I want the space to do that. And I think we can't really do that justice and do audiences justice based on how much they really do know about these players, their investment, how much they care, when it's being sort of like held back. It's so truly being held back by the sort of like patriarchal, you know, reining in of things and the Death Star of what you just said.
Well,
but then
go ahead, Patrick.
No, I was just going to say sometimes they intersect, and the tension between those two stories, I think resolves itself in a really interesting way, by which I mean, did you see that Dejanay Carrington beat the shit out of Sophie the other day?
I did. And I mean, to that point too, I think someone actually, one of the broadcasters on ESPN was talking about this, like Dejanay Carrington is a very good defensive player in transition a lot of the times and has come up on people in similar situations and blocked the shot cleanly and blocked the shit out of somebody who's like going for a layup in that moment. And so like, I think there is some basketball there too that is getting lost. And this image of like her arm around Sophie's face sort of taking her down. Yeah, I totally understand like how audiences are like, thank you for that trans foul. That was a great.
As someone on Twitter said, I believe in trans rights and lesbian lefts, which I really liked. But like the point I was sort of making there is like this is almost the like the good like inverse of the way that a lot of people talk about the Caitlin foul stuff, which I think was mostly sort of a form of collective psychosis / agreeing to lie, where they're like, people shouldn't commit fouls on Caitlin Clark because she individually is responsible for making them money. And it's like, okay, well, that's obviously stupid. But I do like this idea that like someone like Sophie is actually like the real check on her being able to express these bigoted beliefs isn't like the marketplace of ideas. It's that her coworkers are just not going to let her get away with shit like that.
Right.
And I think that's you know, that's policing and like that's community policing itself in a really beautiful way, I think.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think let's talk about those coworkers. I am so curious. I think maybe my biggest curiosity in this cursed Sophie situation is to see what kind of responses it could provoke now and maybe down the line from her coworkers. Like, are they going to allow this person to function as such a dog whistle for MAGA sort of, what's the word? Implant? No, like a
Sleeper cell?
Yeah, so yeah. Who's just
double agent?
Yeah, it was like clearly there to rile up, that sort of alt-right voice and also benefit from it. Like I saw some stat that and this was a little while ago, so I'm sure it's more now, but like had gained like over 700,000 Instagram followers, since she first said she didn't want to play with biological men, right? Like, how do her coworkers really feel about that? Are they gonna fuck with that? Is that, really falling in line with the code of conduct for the WNBA that, says that, you can't cause harm, to your coworkers, many of whom I think are gender nonconforming. And I wonder, like, if maybe in the years to come, we will see more WNBA players coming out as non-binary, using they, them pronouns, right? Like, I'm not convinced that people in the WNBA, in terms of sort of expression of gender, feel like they're able to be open about that right now. And Sophie Cunningham is most certainly on the wrong side of history, right, when it comes to gender politics. And so I don't know. I wonder if in like 10 years we'll look back and be like, remember when that fucking very mediocre player on the Indiana Fever, who was scoring like less than 5 points a game at that point? I don't know actually her actual stats, but they're not good.
She was minus 28 yesterday, and is, I think, setting records for plus minus over multi-game stretches. So this is clearly, I mean, that's the interesting thing is like, did you watch the Aces Fever game from the other day, the overtime Chelsea?
Yeah.
It was phenomenal, such a phenomenal game. But like, you could see, I think, like real tension on like the Fever bench, and the way that like Stephanie White was talking about the Dijonais foul yesterday. It's like, I think there really is an on-court effect of a lot of this stuff, which again undercuts all the fake Sophie defenses about how she just wants to play basketball and just cares about playing basketball. And it's like, you're costing your team, games. Like, you can't be doing that.
Right. And I don't know if this is, I've actually been I've had no one to whine about this to. Maybe this is how the world fucking works, but I just can't believe that, like, we can both know so clearly that this is bullshit, have so many other things to talk about. We're still talking about this, lol. No, but also that every time I open my fucking Instagram, like, I'm seeing all this made up shit still. My phone is probably listening to me now and is going to like provide me with more like New York Post, whatever, like discourse that is like actually does have nothing to do with what I love and care about and think is most important about the WNBA, which I think sort of to the point of like, how much do we talk about this and not talk about this? I just think as much as maybe we're going to talk about the sort of bullshit of this kind of situation, we have to keep talking about what we really care about and what matters. And that includes trans fans, that includes trans people, and the rights of trans people, that includes trans athletes, that includes, right, the Chelsea Gray hitting both the end of regulation and overtime like buzzer beater to down the Fever in Indiana, and the Valkyries being so weirdly good, and all the rest that there is to talk about. I don't mean to like kill this conversation entirely right now, but
it's time. Let me transition us.
All right.
It's October 25th, 2026.
Okay.
You are being held aloft. The trans homies are tossing you in the sky because we're walking down Market Street. Harry's here. The Golden State Valkyries have just won the WNBA championship in their second season. Olivia Miles has given a tearful press conference saying, "I didn't expect to get put in Gabby jail, and when we meet next year, I think I'll know what I'm ready for." Caitlin Chen, there's a statue being built of her. Natalie Nakase is talking crazy shit. She's just shotgunned 2 beers at once. No, go on. What else is happening?
No. She's shotgunning 2 beers, even though apparently she only drinks red wine. Okay, but keep going.
She's shotgunning 2 canned wines that she got at what's that place on Dolores? Buy right. She's at Buy Right Market. She's just shotgunned 2 Oregon Pinots.
Brandon Pajemski is for some reason on the float with all the players.
No.
No, they airdropped him there. We don't know how. He's now on he's on the Rockets, but like he actually flew back.
Yeah.
Actually, that would be nice. If we trade him to somewhere and he still supports the Valkyries, I would fuck with that. But okay, sorry, keep going. Keep going.
There's 3 or 4 amazing posts from various cracked out 996 AI engineers just being confused about why all this stuff is on market because they don't know what's going on. What else has happened? They announced the Sacramento Monarchs are coming back.
Wow.
I mean, purple themed WNBA basketball in Northern California is so popular.
Wow.
How realistic do you see this scenario? I mean, you've been around the Valks. They're one of 3 teams I think in this season who can win the championship.
Wow.
I'm feeling crazy. I'm talking wild shit in our basketball Slack. Is it going to happen? Are they going to win?
Damn. I mean, you're making me feel really good about it right now. And I do think that they have this like special sauce that is so hard for other teams to kind of like pin down. And they lead by defense. It's so true. They don't have a single sort of superstar, right? The sort of everybody shines mentality. I think they might even have the highest scoring bench in WNBA history right now. And it's insane. I guess if we're talking about the likelihood of them winning. So I think the Valkyries are technically in second place right now, but they've sort of been in this third place position for a while with the Aces and Lynx ahead of them. And the reality is that they have only defeated I'm talking about 2 teams, but they have only defeated one of those teams one time.
Yeah, but Olivia hit like 9 out of 9 threes in one of those games. That doesn't count. That's a win. That's 2. So we just doubled our win total.
Okay.
And that was before Janelle was making every single 3 she took. And the feet, they're going to get the World Cup bump after, presumably. I don't care about the mechanics. It's going to happen. And Olivia's going to hit the rookie wall. So
and Natalie, like I'm pretty obsessed with Natalie Nakase. I think she talked about at the beginning of the season being more comfortable talking to the press, and I think she's pretty incredible at talking to the press most of the time.
Say more.
She's so like, or at least it feels like a member of the media that she's like really willing to be honest and talk openly about her own growth as a coach, and take accountability, and say things like, sort of earlier in the season, like, I don't think I prepared them well enough for this game. I think we practiced too hard this week, or I'm still trying to hold myself accountable for demanding that they, give it everything that they have and empty the tank. There's this whole thing about emptying the tank. And I think that sort of openness and the fact that she's also sort of stated her goals early on. And she really does have this goal of not wanting there to be one superstar. And she's talked about getting better and needing to get better at like how she manages the rotations. And I think that she is really getting better at that. They've also talked about sort of like sticking with this, philosophy where like offensively they really spread the floor and they shoot more threes than anyone in the league. Like they haven't let down on that or said, oh, it's not working as well as we want to, we're taking it back. Like they've stuck with these things through this lens of like, we're growing, we're getting better. And I think that like we are seeing some of those results. Like they're moving the ball a lot quicker, and they're getting more consistent in terms of hitting from 3, or at least for right now. And it feels like, maybe this is like a strength that we don't necessarily know the ceiling, including from the players, from the coaches. And so, I think that and sort of their ability to tell that story as it's happening, or Natalie's ability to tell that story, is like really, really, really compelling.
When you say tell that story, what do you mean? Like tell that to the media, or like as a coach giving her own players the narrative to push it forward?
I think both. I think telling the story to the media with this sense of honesty or authenticity, like Natalie Nakase talks about like authenticity as a superpower. And there's also this sense that like everyone is really there for a reason, that the players have been deeply scouted and chosen. And that's why they didn't make any moves during the trade, before the trade deadline. Like there's this sense of wanting to maintain continuity and this vision that they have. And then a willingness to sort of talk, not openly, but it feels like she gives us more sort of like candid answers, I think, than one might necessarily expect. I also love when Natalie Nakase will talk about, like, she is not publicly known to have been in like any romantic relationships ever. There's no like public information about that, but she's like constantly talking about relationships. Like she'll be like, for the trade deadline, she was like, when you're in like a really good relationship, like you gotta stay in it. Like she uses these like personal metaphors. And there's this sense of like,
she's just like me for real.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
She's a good hang reader.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. And yeah, they'll talk about like authentically connecting with each other. And I think so there's like this buy-in that is taking place where like the players are clearly really bought into the system, but also she'll acknowledge ways that like the players push her to be better, or like that they want to be coached harder. And so, yeah, there's like this collective story, I guess, that I think also Bay Area fans are responding to really well, that is not reliant on, who is the superstar, who's going to take us all the way. It's like, how are we creating this thing together? Which is awesome.
It's really striking, and I think strikingly different from how basically any other team in the league plays. But also like, historically, like the playoffs are about who's got the biggest dog in the fight. And that's something that I really wonder is like when they have to go up against like the Lynx and the Aces, and no one else really scares me in the league. Like the Mystics are fun. I don't consider them super serious challengers. Like how much is this like playing 10 deep, like having a person in the starting lineup who doesn't score, like how much of that is really going to be a problem, I wonder. And like, ultimately, this is certainly wishful thinking, and like I'm a fan of the Valkyries, so I'm going to believe in this. But like, I really do think that that level of like defensive identity is going to be the thing that like will carry them, like more than their whatever offensive struggles they have. Like they'll live and die by the three, but like the foundation of just Gabby and Veronica Burton like having ball handlers in eternal hell with like Kia Stokes, who will shoot 2 shots a night but block like 4 shots. Like that foundation is just so solid against basically everyone except Asia, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kia has, I think, the most blocks per minute in the WNBA, at least as of a couple days ago. So she's not number 1 in blocks overall, but she plays fewer minutes. So in terms of the number of minutes she plays, she has the most blocks per minute. And yeah, right. Like if everyone is contributing at the highest level of like their capability, then potentially, right, it's like you just have an unstoppable full starting 5 and bench that how can other teams sort of compete with that, even if they do have an Asia? And the Valkyries have also been pretty amazing at shutting down the sort of high scorers on other teams and making miserable nights for, Caitlin Clark or Sabrina Ionescu, or Caitlin did not make a single 3 in Valhalla the first time that she played in San Francisco last season, which was so sweet to see. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I wonder potentially how much experience is going to factor in as well, right? This is obviously this franchise hasn't been around for even 2 seasons yet, and I guess you have Kayla Thornton championship experience. Gabby obviously has a ton of experience, but we're gonna have to podcast in October, at the end of October, and
see what happens.
Talk about what happened.
The only other thing I would add is because we were jokingly in the run of show. We were talking about the for the gays chant that sort of exploded in Valhalla. The there is something serious though about a like ineffable kind of like folksy quality that emerges from certain teams, like where there's just a kind of a togetherness or like a synergy between the crowd and the players or whatever, and it does. And one of the signs of this kind of thing are when these like mass meme events happen. Like the We Believe Warriors is another one that comes to mind of just like that there was like a folksy thing going on there. And it's never a bad sign when like a random like elated basketball on the court moment becomes a slogan for the team. Like that is always a good sign.
I love that. I mean, I think there really is a lot of possibility for that here. I have two friends who are season ticket holders, who are trans and who make the best signs in Valhalla. And they have like been featured often on the Jumbotron recently. Their sign said, "Violet is trans." And my friend Ryan, was taking a photo next to Violet, who, by the way, saw their sign. We can't know for sure if the person inside of the Violet costume read these words, but Violet the bird, the mascot at the game, extended a hand to Ryan and said, "Come here, take a picture with me."
Let's go.
While Ryan held their sign that said "Violet is trans." And I think that there is like a kind of imaginativeness here in the Bay that fans bring to the WNBA that is really refreshing and dope and comes from this, the Bay, which we all love, and is a place where there's been like, a ton of sort of like queer and progressive and left, political, artistic history, but also mostly not pro women's basketball teams, at least that, have continued coherently until this day. And so you have this fan base that's just like so hungry to have a place to express themselves in a women's basketball context. And I think some really exciting things can happen. I did go to a New York Liberty game recently, and I want to shout out.
Oh, I want to ask you about this interview.
New York.
It was amazing, but keep going.
Okay. It's funny because in 2021, when the Liberty started playing in Brooklyn, I just remember getting the sense of like, I went to an East Coast liberal arts college, and so all these people I went to college with were now going to games, walking over from their fancy apartments in Brooklyn to go to Liberty games. And I was like, okay, everyone is so like fake WNBA and their fancy Brooklyn digs. And then I went there, most recently. I'd been there before to Barclays, but I was like, this is like grandma's house compared to Chase Center. Like, this is like some good home cooking, I got a ticket for $20. I showed up at the box office. I said, "What's your cheapest seat?" They gave me a $20 ticket. You can get game day. You show up to, is there even a box office at Chase Center? There probably is somewhere where you can buy it, but maybe you have to do it on your phone. Who knows? And like the cheapest thing that you're going to find if you do it that way, I think is going to be like $60 for to have your back against the wall at the top of Chase Center. Also the fact that there's just like, public transit that goes there directly. You can take one train and then everyone from across the city of New York can come up the stairs and sort of like ascend into Barclays. Like, and the fact that you have fans that have been there since the 90s. That you have longtime fans there that have seen this franchise, the Liberty, through moving out to Westchester, moving out to Jersey. Like, there's a depth there that, of course, in some ways, and there are longtime women's basketball fans here in the Bay, and I love those people. I'm obsessed with finding them and talking to them. But it also, I think, is at the same time that it is sort of like more progressive, more of a queer scene, more of like, it's a scene. And so therefore it also is more expensive. It's potentially less accessible. And the franchise, the corporation, right, and Joe Lacob are able to profit off of the fans, even more than the owners that bought in, a while ago, or in terms of the prices that they're charging right now, and the sort of like, they're like the quickest franchise to climb to that like $500 million mark. They're not doing that by being a grassroots organization. They're doing that by being very good at making money.
Yeah, there's that, like, again, we see a different version of that tension play out. And I having gone to a few games both this year and last year, it does seem gayer in there this year. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I kind of do. I mean, like, one queer person said it to me. They were like, yeah, this is my first game, but I'm always seeing like people in violet on public transit in San Francisco. And I'm like, where are they going? Like, I want to go to where they're going. And the color, honestly, it really works. So yes, there's a link to the Sacramento Monarchs, the original purple WNBA team of Northern California. But like that violet really stands out. Those Liberty colors, I mean, there's the seafoam, but not as strong, I would say. And so you have this sense that there are just like cool queer Valkyries fans like running around the Bay all the time. Every gay party I go to ever, you'll see people in Valkyries gear. And so, yeah, I do think it's getting gayer for the gays as we chant it. That's only going to bring in more gays.
That will ring out down Market Street when it's parade time. I can't wait for that. I'm going to have to figure out a way to bring the mobile podcasting rig to the parade because, we want to interview people there. Like, but that's months away. We'll figure out the logistics.
I'm so ready. Wow. That's happening.
I can't wait.
Well, before we get you out of here, I got to just read this one chunk of this Rough Notes interview you did. You interviewed these two like courtside Liberty super fans who have been fans for a long time, and the interview is just it's so awesome.
Shout out to Justine.
Yeah, I just have to read this because I just related to it on so many levels. You asked, how'd you two get together? Justine said, I'd see Scott at science fiction events where people mostly didn't dress up. The look was scruffy. The folks styling stood out, and he was always wearing a cool jacket. I remember this fab cobalt blue one with off-kilter plaid pattern. Scott, Comme des Garçons, purchased for my award banquet. When we first hooked up, we didn't know each other very well. First of all, it's knowing the exact designer of the jacket you meet the love of your life in is like, I could be so lucky to be like,
that's good shit.
And then Justine is like, I found out that he had season tickets to the Liberty, and I asked him to marry me because of the season tickets.
No, it's amazing. Yeah, it really was like he. Yeah, it speaks to the like. There's a lot of cynicism going on about the performative male, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But it was refreshing to see you walk in and you see just a guy with like thousands of books written by women in WNBA season tickets, and to just not be burdened by the performative male specter and just be like, this guy seems awesome.
I know. Shout out these two. They are longtime young adult fiction writers. And they just wrote a novel together called The Mortons. So unless that is like an ultra platinum top selling book of all time, they are spending their last season courtside right now because in 2022, they've been season ticket holders since the 90s, and they've been courtside since 2011, I believe. But they actually got a deal when they started sitting courtside the Liberty. I think they were in Jersey, potentially. They weren't at Madison Square Garden. They weren't at Barclays. And the front office gave them a deal. They were like, you can sit 2 rows back or you can pay the same thing to sit courtside. And they were like, okay, we'll sit courtside. Because that's the world that we were in then, right? They wanted and needed people to sit courtside. And now those people have been sitting there and so invested and paying the money, including, so in 2022, they come to Barclays, or 2021 they come. It's like the weird COVID season. But I think they told me 2022, it was like $8,200 for their courtside tickets for the pair. It went up to about $22,000.
Ugh.
Okay. And now the Liberty are asking for $56K.
Oh my God.
So that's why these folks are getting priced out. And they've held on for as long as possible. They made a lot of irresponsible financial decisions to make it this far as novelists
That's what it's all about,
that are not rich people. But yeah, you can check out the interview with them. They have very deep lore, and it makes me think again, like that the lore of this couple that have been at Liberty Games since the 90s. And I mean, they're like hilarious because they're writers and they're weirdos and they have interesting things to say. But like, for me, that when I say women's basketball is my love language, like I think of people like them and I think of the kinds of stories that they told me in this interview. And I think that is markedly different. And there's like a markedly different feel to talking to them than like the kinds of conversations you might have if you show up to a sponsored speed dating event with AI art, you know, for sapphic WNBA fans. The speed dating event that I thought about that was in New York did not have AI art, but I think that there's all this like possibility right now for there to be these kinds of things that are like, oh, you love the WNBA, we're going to sell you this, this, and this. You're going to do this, this, and this. I mean, I guess one thing I could say, just a quick shit talk right before the end, but like when I was in that Together line in Chicago and the line's like twice around the block or something. It was all the way around the block for sure. I don't know if it was twice around the block, but it was taking people over an hour to get in. And they like ran this camera down. This was actually for a live podcast taping. They like ran a camera down and they were like, everyone like be excited. Like, and everyone went like, woo, we fucking love the WNBA so much, blah, blah, blah. And then I said to the woman who was like the hype person for the cameraman, like, do you think that we have any chance of getting in? She was like, don't ask me. That's not my job. Like, I don't know.
Oh my God.
And like that, I think oftentimes feels like the attitude. Like you want us to lose our minds for this product that then we as fans, and again, back to, you know, queer folks that have been showing up for this league for forever, like you are then going to sort of take advantage of, undermine us like that. I feel, of course, like all the fire in me when that happens. And I am curious how other fans are feeling about it too, including folks that are newer to the WNBA, because I think that part of the beauty is that people can jump in that haven't necessarily been into it before because they're seeing themselves in ways that they haven't before. Totally.
That's like a great place to end it. And that's like, I'm glad you raised that frustration, because that's one more thing we can exercise on October 25th, 2026 on Market Street.
No lines, complete rhizomatic cues.
Yeah. the elder dykes of Sacramento Monarchs fandom are going to be like running the show.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And they're going to have a no line culture. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you so much. We haven't even said it. This is crazy. The Substack is Rough Notes. I'm a paid subscriber. Everyone should, like, it's essential coverage of like the characters of the WNBA. Like I learn new stuff every time you post. So keep that up. Thank you for doing it. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Find me on Instagram too, roughnotes.mgs.
And the merch. You're wearing it right now, I think.
Oh yeah.
The merch goes crazy.
It's a great shirt.
I was at a women's sports knockout game hosted by my friend Christiana, and I pulled up, and right there is Christiana's wearing your shirt. So you've made it to the kind of like the queer Brooklyn knockout games.
I love it.
Yeah.
Christiana is also going to reprint that interview I did with Scott and Justine, the Liberty OG.
Oh, hell yeah.
Nice.
Good sport. So yeah, make more internet friends with cool people.
Hell yeah.
Total. Are you saying I should, or that's like a general piece of advice? Because I feel like you're great at that.
Oh, I try, but also you helped me because you showed me you were like,
that's true. That's right.
And I was like, and I hadn't put it together that they were already following me, which was dope. So no, yes, thank you for doing that. And also just generally, like, I think that looking for each other and noticing each other can be like a really powerful way to build this community too. Because yeah, of course, as we've been talking about, it's not necessarily going to be the thing that is the slop that is sort of like spewed onto you, but there are like real people doing real cool shit underneath or everywhere. And we just sort of got to find each other.
Hell yeah. Sweet. Okay.